Solara was just an ordinary girl living in a small village nestled between the mountains. She had long, shiny white hair that glowed in the sunlight and bright blue eyes that sparkled like sapphires. Her father was a blacksmith who worked tirelessly in his shop, creating weapons and tools for the villagers. Solara helped him with his work whenever she could, and she loved to watch the sparks fly as he hammered the hot iron into shape. One day, Solara woke up to a cold and cloudy morning. Winter had set in, and the days were short and dark. She bundled up in her warmest clothes and went outside to help her father with his work. As she was helping him, she noticed a group of strangers approaching the village. They were armed with swords and axes, and they looked dangerous. Solara's father told her to hide inside the shop while he went to investigate. But as he approached the strangers, one of them swung his axe and struck him down. Solara screamed in horror as she saw her father fall to the ground, bleeding and unconscious. Enraged and filled with grief, Solara rushed to her father's side. She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face, and begged him not to leave her. But her father knew that he didn't have much time left. "Solara, my dear," he said weakly. "I need to tell you something. I have always known that you were destined for greatness. And I have been saving something for you, for when you were ready." With trembling hands, her father reached into his pocket and pulled out a small golden disc. He handed it to Solara, and as she touched it, she felt a warm glow emanating from it. "This is for you," he said. "It's made from the finest gold, and it will protect you from harm. Wear it always, and remember that I love you." Solara felt a surge of energy flowing through her body as she put on the golden armor. She could feel the power of the sun coursing through her veins, and she knew that she had been given a special gift. As the strangers approached, Solara stood up and faced them. She raised her hand and pointed it at the attackers, and suddenly a burst of fire shot out of her palm, engulfing them in flames. They screamed and writhed in agony as the fire consumed them, and Solara watched in shock and disbelief as they burned to ash. Before her father took his final breath, he whispered one last instruction to her: "Find your mother. She has the same power as you, and she will help you learn to control it." Solara had never known her mother, for she had left when Solara was just a baby. She had heard stories about her mother's power and beauty, but she had always assumed that they were just myths. After the attack, she held her father's lifeless body in her arms. She wept uncontrollably and knew that her father was gone forever. But she looked down at her golden armor and knew that her father was still with her, watching over her and protecting her from harm. From that day on, Solara began to train herself in the use of her newfound powers. She practiced controlling fire and light, and she honed her skills in combat. She became a radiant warrior, traveling to different parts of the world to fight against evil and protect the innocent. And even as she fought, she knew that her father's love and strength were always with her, embodied in the golden armor that he had created for her. Now, with her father gone and her power growing stronger every day, Solara knew that she had to find her mother. She set out on a journey to search for her, determined to uncover the truth about her past and her powers. One night, Solara was wandering through the misty woods when she heard a strange whisper. She spun around, but there was no one there. She shook her head, convinced that she had imagined it, and continued on her way. But then the whisper came again, louder this time. Solara stopped in her tracks, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. And that's when she saw it, a strange message, written in glowing letters that seemed to hover in midair. The letters swirled and formed the shape of words that she could almost read. Solara stepped forward, reaching out to touch the letters. But as soon as she did, they vanished, leaving her alone in the darkness. She stood there for a long moment, her heart racing with excitement and fear. Who had sent her this message, and why? The next day, she began to follow the path that the message had laid out for her. She didn't know where it would lead her, but she knew that she had to find out. The message was from her brother, a man that she had never met before, who claimed that he could lead her to her mother. But Solara was hesitant to trust him. After all, she had heard stories of her brother's power of darkness, and she wasn't sure that she wanted to get involved with someone like that. Still, she had no other choice. She needed to find her mother, and this was the only lead she had. So, with a deep breath, Solara stepped forward and followed the directions in the message. As she walked, the alleyway became darker and more ominous. Shadows seemed to leap out at her from every corner, and she could hear strange whispers and murmurs all around her. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the darkness, blocking her path. It was her brother, and he was surrounded by an aura of darkness. "Solara," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I've been waiting for you." Solara tensed, ready to fight if necessary. But her brother simply held out a hand, offering to guide her through the darkness. "Trust me," he said. "I know the way to your mother. And I can help you find her." Solara hesitated for a moment, but then she nodded. She had no other choice. She reached out and took her brother-in-law's hand, and suddenly, everything changed. The darkness around them began to fade away, replaced by a brilliant light that illuminated the alleyway. Solara felt a surge of power within her, and she knew that her mother's power was calling to her. Her brother led her down the alleyway, his hand warm and reassuring in hers. And as they walked, Solara felt a growing sense of trust and respect for him. Finally, they arrived at a small door, hidden away in the shadows. Her brother-in-law turned to her, his eyes full of concern. "Solara," he said. "You should know that your mother is not the person you remember. She has changed. She has become something else." Solara nodded, her heart heavy with emotion. She knew that things would never be the same again. But she also knew that she had to find her mother, no matter what. With a deep breath, Solara pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dark and foreboding, filled with strange symbols and twisted shapes. But at the far end of the room, she could see a figure, a woman with long golden hair and eyes that sparkled like diamonds. "Mother," Solara said, her voice filled with emotion. "I have come to find you." Her mother turned to her, her expression unreadable. "Solara," she said. "You have grown so much. I am proud of you." Solara felt a sense of relief and happiness wash over her. Despite everything, her mother was still proud of her. She stepped forward, ready to embrace her mother and begin a new chapter of their lives together. Solara spent several weeks with her mother, learning everything she could about the power of the sun. She trained tirelessly, honing her skills and becoming more powerful with each passing day. But eventually, the time came for her to return to the village. Her brother was facing a powerful darkness that he could not hold off alone, and Solara knew that she had to help him. As she prepared to leave, her mother pulled her close and whispered in her ear. "Remember, Solara. The power of the sun is not just about strength and destruction. It is also about warmth, and love, and healing. Use your power wisely." Solara nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of her mother's words. She said goodbye to her mother and set out on her journey back to the village. When she arrived, she found her brother locked in a fierce battle against the darkness. Solara joined him, her golden armor glowing with the power of the sun. Together, they fought with all their might, but the darkness was too strong. Suddenly, Solara was hit with a blast of energy, and she felt her strength falter. She knew that she was going to die. But even as she fell to the ground, she could see her brother's power of darkness growing stronger. He was using his power to fight the darkness, and she knew that he would win. As she closed her eyes, Solara thought of her mother and all that she had learned about the power of the sun. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, and she knew that she had done everything she could to help her brother and protect her village. But just as she was about to slip away into the darkness, something miraculous happened. Her mother appeared, her eyes shining with tears. She knelt down beside Solara and placed a hand on her forehead. "Rise, my daughter," her mother whispered. "Rise and fight once more." Suddenly, Solara felt a surge of energy coursing through her body. She stood up, her golden armor shining brighter than ever before. She lifted her hand, and a beam of pure sunlight shot out, striking the darkness and destroying it once and for all. Her brother looked at her in awe, his eyes shining with tears. "Solara," he said. You came back to us." Solara smiled, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. She had been given a second chance, and she knew that she would never waste it. As the people of the village gathered around her, cheering and celebrating their victory, Solara stood tall and proud. She knew that her mother was watching over her, and that she would always be with her, guiding her and protecting her with the power of the sun.